So hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome back to Favourites Week. This week I'm talking about all of my favourite books in various categories, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favourite series. At number 10, I have the Sherlock Holmes books. Whether or not you count these as a series is up to you, I don't know, but I'm counting them as a series for this purpose. I love the Sherlock Holmes stories a lot. I would say that I don't love all of the books in the series as much as some of the others. In general, I prefer the short story collections to the novels, with the exception of The Hound of the Baskervilles, and there are some of the novels that I'm not a super big fan of, but the characters of Sherlock Holmes and Watson are so well done and so fantastic that as a whole big kind of canon of books, as a series, I love the Sherlock Holmes books a lot. This is a book series from the Victorian period running into the 20th century. Sherlock Holmes is a consulting detective, and he ends up sharing rooms with a man called Dr. Watson, and Watson ends up kind of helping Holmes in his mysteries. One of the things I love about the Sherlock Holmes mysteries is that a lot of them are not like murder mysteries, which I feel like is what a lot of mysteries are. Like when I pick up a modern mystery book, I expect it to be a murder mystery. And actually one of the things I like about Sherlock Holmes is sometimes there's not a murder, though sometimes there is. A lot of the time there's just like something weird's happened. There's just something a bit weird that needs to be explained that Sherlock Holmes goes and looks into. The characterisation of Sherlock Holmes and Watson is done so well. The books are really, really funny. They can be a bit ridiculous at times, but I love that about them. So yeah, definitely at number 10 it belongs at the Sherlock Holmes books. At number 9, I am putting the Poirot series. I have only read 8 out of the 45 Poirot novels, which is not very many at all, but I have loved all of the 8 Poirot books that I have read. Poirot is a short, elderly Belgian man who previously was a detective working in Belgium and ends up becoming an amateur detective in his old age. I love the Poirot books. Poirot is hilarious. I really enjoy his relationship with Hastings, who narrates some of the books, and who is a little bit slow to catch on sometimes, and who Poirot is very patronising towards. It's very entertaining. I also love the way Agatha Christie writes, and I love the way she does her characterisation and the way that she creates these mysteries, and the way that Poirot solves them, and the way that you watch his technique as he solves them is just fantastic. I think my favourite Poirot book is probably Murder on the Orient Express, but I have loved every single book I have read about Poirot so far. At number 8, a slightly more traditional series, I have the Bartimaeus Trilogy by Jonathan Stroud. This is a fantastic children/teen series. I feel like it's probably at the kind of 12 to 13 age bracket, which is somewhere a little bit in between. I didn't read these books as a child. I read them as an adult for the first time because Nick loves them and really recommended them to me, and I really, really enjoyed them. Jonathan Stroud has such a fantastic and funny way of writing. This trilogy is set in a kind of alternate version of London where there are magicians, and it is the magicians who kind of rule everything and who kind of have the power and the government, and we follow one young man who becomes a magician, and in order to make his magic more powerful he has to summon a demon. And this demon, Bartimaeus, is very, very funny and has no time for Nathaniel's silliness. And his narrative sections, which are told in the first person, have footnotes where he explains things about the demon world he is from and also makes jokes. It's just really good fun. It's just such a great series. I would highly recommend it. At number 7, I have the Palliser novels by Anthony Trollope. I actually have a book to hold up for this. This is The Prime Minister, the 5th book in the series, just standing in for the series as a whole. So this series is often called the Palliser series, but has also been known as the Parliamentary novels. So this is a series by Anthony Trollope of interconnected novels. So there are some characters who turn up in all of the novels, and there are plot lines that run through the whole series, but each book has its own individual plot and its own individual set of characters who don't turn up in other books as well. I love that style. I think an interconnected set of novels is just a fantastic thing, and I love it. And the Pallisers are really fantastic. So I especially love the character of Mr. Palliser, and the way that you get to track his life and his relationships over the course of the whole series. I think he is so well done and so fantastic. I also find the way that this series explores Parliament and politics in the Victorian period fascinating. They're such good books, and really, really wonderful. My favourite in the series is probably The Prime Minister, which I love. I also love the first one, Can You Forgive Her? And one of the reasons why this is slightly lower down the list is that the 4th book in the series, Phineas Redu, I don't like very much, and that's my least favourite Anthony Trollope, so that kind of drags the whole series down a little bit, even though I love the series as a whole still a lot. But if Phineas Radu were not there, this might be higher up the list, if you see what I mean. But anyway, it is a fantastic series. So interesting, so powerful, and yeah, I love an interconnected series of novels. At number 6, I have the Harry Potter series. Probably don't need to tell you what Harry Potter is about, but I love Harry Potter. I've had a slightly weird Harry Potter journey where I read Harry Potter as a child, as many people of my generation did, and I really loved Harry Potter, I did. Like, I used to have a Harry Potter dressing gown, so I must have been quite keen. But then I got to like the age of 13 and I discovered Victorian literature. I kind of went off Harry Potter a bit. Like, I still read the books, but I remember like when the 7th book came out, like my mum and my brother read it before I did. And while I wanted to read it and I was excited to read it, I wasn't as hyped for Harry Potter as a lot of people in my generation were. And it wasn't until I went to university and the friends I lived with loved Harry Potter so much that I kind of got back into the world of Harry Potter, and then I reread them all just after I finished university and loved them so much more. Like, I enjoyed Harry Potter as an adult on a level I had never enjoyed them as a child. I just got so much more out of them because, God, they are so funny. And I think as a child I hadn't got the humour in the way that I do as an adult. But actually Harry Potter is hilarious in a really like Dickensian way. Like, J.K. Rowling clearly has a really Dickensian sense of humour, which I love. The Harry Potter series, I think, is fantastic in many ways. I think they're really good as like a very long coming of age story. I also really like the way the magic system works and the way that J.K. Rowling blends like traditional ideas connected with magic, like witches flying on broomsticks, and then makes them like modern, and you have Quidditch. Like, it's just really, really fun. I would also say there is some great characterization in Harry Potter. Mostly of the slightly more minor characters maybe than the more major ones, but I think Harry Potter himself is supposed to be a bit of an everyman, so maybe that's why. But like, Severus Snape is a fantastically drawn character. Albus Dumbledore has got to be the most interesting character in Harry Potter. Neville Longbottom, Remus Lupin, like, so many characters who are just superb. Yeah, I love Harry Potter a lot, what more can I say? At number 5, I have the Cicero Trilogy by Robert Harris. This is a series of 3 historical novels set in ancient Rome following the life of Cicero, who was a real man, though this is semi-fictionalised. I mean, it is fictionalised, it is a fictional novel, but a lot of it is based in fact. And Cicero was a kind of statesman and around at the time that Julius Caesar was on the rise. So in this we follow Cicero's life, narrated by the perspective of his slave Tyro, who later became his secretary, who is a fantastic character in his own right as well, and also sort of following Julius Caesar and Pompey and various other characters around Cicero. This trilogy is fantastic. They are some of the most fast-paced, dramatic, exciting historical fiction books I have ever read. Like, oh my goodness. I don't think it would have really occurred to me how much I might love a like political thriller set in ancient Rome, but Nick read these books and recommended them to me, and I listened to the first one on audiobook, and then I just listened to the rest, and I just fell completely in love with this world and the characters and the way Robert Harris writes, which is so exciting and so dramatic. And like, every time you think something's got as bad as it can be, something even worse happens. Cicero is such a fantastic character for being someone who means well most of the time, but every now and then makes like terrible mistakes, and you just watch him like do these things and you're like, no Cicero, what are you doing? You could be better than that, because he's torn between like wanting to be a good man but also wanting power, and knowing that to be a good man and to have influence on the world in a positive way, you need to have a certain amount of power in the system that he's in. I also love the relationship between him and Tyro. It's so interesting, the relationship between them, which is at the heart of the series in many ways, because Tyro is his slave, but they're also like really close friends, but he's also his slave, and the way that kind of relationship is dealt with is just fantastic. At number 4, I have the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. I love The Name of the Wind, and I love For the Wise Man's Fear. The 3rd book in this series will appear at some point in the distant future. I look forward to it with a lot of hope and love, because this series is fantastic. Both books are a story within a story. The Name of the Wind opens in a tavern, and a scribe discovers that the man who works in this tavern may actually be a man called Quoth, who is known as the King Killer, and who has like all of these myths around him, and he persuades Quoth to like tell him the story of his life, and so Quoth does, and that is the story we get over the course of the 2 books. The magic system in the Kingkiller Chronicles is fantastic. Like, the magic system is so well thought out, so interesting, so well done. I couldn't really explain it if I tried, but it's done so well in the book. I also think the way the books look at grief and growing up, and poverty and class are like so interesting. It's really quite Dickensian in many ways, and I would also say that the writing style is beautiful, like really lyrical and lovely. It's so well written and so wonderful. It's also like a really accessible fantasy novel, I think, because I have read some high fantasy where I'm like, there's so many characters and there's such a complicated world that I don't understand, I just don't know what I'm doing. Whereas because a lot of the book is first person narrative and Quoth is like telling you the story of his life, you can really get into it. Also, Quoth is a musician and I love the way that music operates in this series. I think the way that music is looked at is just fantastic and I love it a lot. At number 3, I have the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman. I love these books a lot. I read them and loved them as a child, and then I have reread them as an adult and love them even more. Partly as well because they're my fiance Nick's favourite books. And so like we've listened to them on audiobook together and like we've talked about them a lot, and so therefore like his love for them has like increased my love for them as well. These 3 books are set in like an alternate version of Earth where people have demons who are like physical embodiments of people's souls that are in animal form. And we follow in the first book a young girl called Lyra and her demon Pantalaimon, and what happens when she gets mixed up in things that she really shouldn't have got mixed up in. And then in the second book we follow a character called Will, who is from our world, and what happens when his world collides with Lyra's world in a complicated way. There's a lot of things in His Dark Materials that I love. One of the things I love about them is how many layers these books have. Like, I read them as a child and got so much out of them, and then I read them as an adult and I was like, I did not pick up on any of this stuff. There's so much in these books about religion and growing up and the way we teach children to think about growing up, about like ideas about sin and morality, about love and family, and about like different worlds and different possibilities of worlds and like systems of government and oppression and like what it means to be a person. And there's just so many things going on in His Dark Materials which are amazing, and I just love it. It's just a fantastic series, just a truly fantastic series of books. At number 2, I have A Dance in the Music of Time by Anthony Powell. I have a book to show you for this one for a change. This is Books Do Furnish a Room, which is the 10th book in the series, standing in for the whole series. I love A Dance in the Music of Time a lot. It is a fantastic book series and one of my favourites, though not quite my absolute favourite book series of all time. It is a book series that was written between the 50s and the 70s and spans from the 20s to the 70s, and it follows a man called Nicholas Jenkins telling the story in first person perspective, but doesn't really follow his life exactly. It more follows the lives of all of the people that he meets over the course of his life, over the course of 12 books, which span 50 years. So it is a fantastic, brilliant exploration of 20th century British history, cultural, social, political, economic history, like all of it. And it's also a brilliant character study, and like the way that characters, you'll like meet them in book 1 and then they won't turn up again until book 7, or you'll see them on and off throughout the courses of the series. There are so many characters, like so many characters, and yet all of them are so fully fledged and so real and so complex. One of the other main characters, aside from Nick himself, is Widmerpool, who is a boy he goes to school with, and then they kind of meet each other throughout their lives as they grow up. And Widmerpool is very, very different to Nicholas Jenkins. He's very, very ambitious, where Nick is not, and he views the world in very, very different ways to Nick, and the kind of conflict between those two people and those two personalities over the course of the series is just fantastic. Yeah, I highly, highly recommend this series a lot. And finally, my favourite book series of all time is The Barsetshire Chronicles by Anthony Trollope. Here is Barchester Towers, which is standing in for the whole series. This series of books is just amazing, and I love them a lot. This is a series of interconnected novels, so a bit like the Palliser series. Each book can technically be read on its own. It has its own individual plot, but all of the books do kind of spoil the plots of the previous books, and various characters from each book kind of turn up in each other's books. This series is incredible. There is a lot that I love about it as a whole, and there is a lot that I love about its individual books. When I did my top 10 classics video on Monday, I talked about the 5th book in the series, The Small House at Allington, which is my favourite book in the series, but the series as a whole is just so amazing. The series is set in the fictional county of Barsetshire, and a lot of the people we follow are clergymen, and it looks a lot about the role of clergymen in Victorian Britain and kind of ideas of religion and morality, and should people who are clergymen be held to higher moral thresholds than everyone else around them. The series also contains a lot of fantastic love stories, a lot of brilliant observations about family and money and class. One of the things I quite like about the Barsetshire Chronicles is that, unlike the Palliser novels, which is very aristocratic, I would say, the Barsetshire Chronicles is sort of more lower down the social spectrum. There's quite a few characters who are really, really struggling with money, who are struggling to make ends meet. There's a lot about class and sort of social divide in this. There's quite a few kind of love stories between people who are aristocratic and people who are sort of in the lower middle classes, and how both of them deal with that. There's just so many interesting things going on in the Barsetshire Chronicles, and I love every single book in it so much. All of them are so powerful and so well done and so brilliant, with so many interesting themes throughout, and I just can't recommend that series enough. And there we have it. Those are my top 10 favourite book series. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. I mean, probably most of you will have read Harry Potter, but you know, the other ones that are slightly less universally read. And do let me know as well down in the comments what your favourite book series is. I would love to know. And yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about my top 10 favourite plays.